caught in the crossfire.
Hey everybody, HideYourCarry here. You may know me, you may not, but today I am here with Rolwen. Please introduce yourself, Rolwen.
Hello, I am a Latin American semi-pro team coach.
And we are here to VOD review some of the games from various regions' finals. So, first of all, we're going to start off here with the LCK finals, Game 1. And we're hoping to take a look at these reviews to see how we think these teams are playing out their compositions, what we think their win conditions are, and how these games go from a macro perspective. I think it should be interesting, and I'm excited to try it.
Yeah, and one thing that we will try to do differently from other bot reviews is that we will focus a lot on the game knowledge and the decision making behind their compositions, behind their shot callers, behind individuals. And yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
So we're starting off from the very beginning of the game, not diving into champ select or pick ban, but we're going to jump into the team comps themselves. So here we have a really interesting matchup.
I'd say.
So SKT has a bit more of a standard comp. That wouldn't be the case if we went back a couple months ago, because that Hecarim top would be confusing to someone time traveling. But it's a pretty standard comp right now, whereas Griffin went a little bit on the different side.
A little bit on the crazy side, if you ask me. This is a strategy from the BBQ Oliver's strat book from coached by LS, by the way. And yeah, it's actually a really interesting thing to see on a game one, because usually teams would save weird picks and really peculiar champions until later stages in the match, right? Mm-hmm. It's actually interesting that they pulled it out so early, when it's just game one, which is just like the exploration game. You want to sort of gauge how the other team is playing on the day.
Admittedly, I mean, there is something to be said for gaining a momentum lead right out of the gate, especially for a team that, I mean, I don't watch as much LCK as you do, obviously, but it seems like Griffin is a lot on team synergy and just stomping in a lot of cases. And so, not necessarily always, but just it seems like the type of thing that if you can gain an early momentum advantage, then that's probably pretty good if you're a team that relies on something like that.
Yeah, they've been called the hive mind for a reason. So I want to go through with the individual matchups first.
Yeah.
So one thing, a time traveler would have a little bit of a hard time understanding our Hecarim top here, but
I mean, he would have a harder time understanding the Silas, because he wouldn't have existed yet.
Oh yeah, of course.
But
I mean, Licorice did pull it out late last year, as a counter matchup against Aatrox, right?
But it's been a few seasons since it was meta.
Yeah, it's been a while since we actually saw Hecarim consistently. Now, this is a matchup, if I've ever seen one, where either side can just get obliterated up to a point. Up to if there is some jungler assistance from either side, the matchup can get really sketchy. It can get really dirty as well.
Which is why I'm glad to see from both sides that they chose an early jungler that can influence that lane. Like, neither of them chose a scaling jungler. Because if you have Rek'Sai and then Griffin had taken something that scales later into the game, oh my gosh, that Hecarim is going to be huge.
Yeah, and one has to think that neither of these champions is actually well-rounded for all situations. It's actually Hecarim is a niche champion in that sense. That if he has the opportunity to engage, to flank, to team fight, that's perfect. If Sylas gets again a flank or has got a great ultimate ready to use in a team fight or a pick, then it's great. Otherwise, we don't really see them shine by themselves. So I think the top matchup being so volatile is not that big of a deal.
How do you think they are in
on
a side
paper.
lane? How do you think each of them are in a side lane? Like,
It's interesting. Early game, I would definitely think that the amazing wave clear that Sylas can pull out if with proper micro optimizations of like hitting the entire wave with the passive and things like that. He definitely has the push advantage. Yes. Hecarim on the other side, I don't know. Doesn't matter how much they've changed the mana cost or cooldown of Q or some bug fixes of damage not applying correctly. He's just so mana hungry early game, so I don't think he can control the wave as effectively.
how about later in the game? Because you were talking about how they both fulfill kind of a similar role in team fights, kind of flanking, disrupting, but being doing a certain job. But
Right.
as far as comp-wise, like, which of them do you think provides a better 1-3-1 or 1-4 threat? Because I think that both Akali and Ryze can look for side lane pressure, and I'm curious if how the top laners will fare there.
Right. There's always the argument of does Sylas have a good ultimate to fight? And whether he is flanking just by walking or flanking by teleport, I don't think it really matters. Though Hecarim flanking or teleporting from the lane instead of from base, where he gets the extra the home guard buff, which is for Hecarim a damage buff. I think that circumstantial difference means that in reality, Hecarim has a higher floor and a higher ceiling than Sylas.
Well, especially since he doesn't need the TP. Hecarim oftentimes can just run.
Gallop to the fight.
Gallop into the fight, whereas Sylas is a little more committed to the lane he's in. I mean, yeah, because unless he's grabbed Faker's ultimate, but
Right. As the jungle connoisseur, how do you look at this jungle matchup, the Olaf versus Rek'Sai?
Because they're both really strong if they happen to meet each other or skirmish early. I do think the interesting thing is that Olaf does not provide a ton of CC, but he has a top laner and a bot lane that have a lot of CC. In fact, that bot lane CC match, like combination, is disgusting. Whereas
absolutely disgusting.
Rek'Sai provides his own CC. If you play it right, but it's a little more conditional. And I think that Faker and Braum provide some nice further setup. So it's interesting that I don't think it's easy for Faker to get ganked and to die here, but I do think that Akali needs to be careful. I don't know. I think there are different lanes they can easily focus on, but I also think that both of them need to be looking top lane, because I would say go all in on bot lane and get that weird lane snowballed, but against an Ezreal Braum, it's kind of hard to assure a gank, because Ezreal is so safe with his E, Braum can W to him, and so I don't know. I think that a lot of the game is going to be focused topside.
Yes, definitely. Another thing is that although Olaf is actually really, really strong early game, the Predator ganks are amazing. It's just not as reliable as Rek'Sai in many cases with the insta flash knockup, right? And the amazing burst that she can put out on just Warrior enchant.
Well, in post 6, it's a little bit better for Olaf in this situation, just because pre-6, I think Rek'Sai's CC is great, and Olaf has trouble getting on a lot of the people on the enemy team. If you run at a Ryze pre-6 as an Olaf, it's like, Okay.
No Galio support, nothing
Yeah,
behind.
there's nothing
Yeah.
to support him early game. I think that if they get a good, I think in a skirmish involving the bottom lane, Olaf is going to have an amazing time. But so if they fight around a dragon, great. But I think that it just like going bottom or mid, it's going to be really hard pre-6 for him to do anything. I don't know.
Yeah. Before moving on to the mid lane matchup, I would just like to point out the rune choices for the top side, for top laners and junglers. And it's actually something really interesting when it comes to your power budget. Both Grasp of the Undying and Predator are runes that don't allow you or don't give you a lot of uptime, right? They are conditional in that sense. So if you haven't charged your Grasp of the Undying proc, it's not going to do much. If you don't have your Predator active up, you're not going to do much, or you're not using it instead. Whilst on the SKT side, Conqueror on both their Hecarim and their Rek'Sai, which are divers in essence, really puts out damage, and they get their effect as soon as they start the fight. So there's no setup required around the rune. So in that sense of power budget, in a vacuum, SKT's top lane and jungle champions are poised to have an easier time just exploiting their champions and their runes abilities.
Because they can wait for those
benefits.
downtimes on their enemies' runes and then engage or look for plays at that point. How
or just in the mid late game, they don't require watching for those runes to be up.
I'm not an expert on New Conqueror. How does it transition into late game? How is Conqueror in the late game now?
I mean, it's a linear sort of scaling. They get more as they level up, and it's important to say, yes, both Rek'Sai and Hecarim have really hard hitting abilities. With the builds that they do, and how their abilities are, they really do take advantage of the extra AD. Of hitting people, right? With stacking Conqueror, and also the extra tier damage. Really, who complained about that? Moving on to the mid lane matchup, I think this is where notwithstanding bot lane and all the shenanigans going on in here, I think the mid lane matchup is the most. I would say underrated in the public opinion, because yes, Akali is known for all of those montage plays that we've seen of
but
assassinating.
Faker, I mean, thinking as
Ryze is dangerous.
I mean, also thinking from a mid jungle duo perspective, like Ryze Rek'Sai early game is scary, and whereas Olaf Akali can't really get on a Ryze. Like Ryze can bully this Akali the first few levels. In pre-6, I think that Faker can play pretty far up, and I think he can deny the Akali. I mean, it's a ranged versus melee matchup where I don't think Faker needs to be that scared.
Yeah. Depending on vision and all of that,
course,
yes, I think he can be more cocky than
not. But he's Faker as well, who is pretty good at getting out of ganks. The other thing is, I like the entire top and jungle don't scale or don't do amazingly well in the late game for SKT, but Ryze, Ezreal, and Braum are all pretty great as the game goes on, and whereas Griffin seems a bit more all-in on their comp, and Pantheon and Olaf definitely do not scale particularly well, and I mean they don't have an ADC, so it's very interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No DPS. It's just burst on the Griffin side. Well, there is a semblance of DPS or just constant damage, even if it's not.
If I was just thinking what they have to do to win, I think that the interesting thing is we talked about how kind of evenly matched this early game is going to be, except for bot lane is a little weird. But we'll talk about that more. But the interesting thing to me is that So as the game goes on, Griffin needs to make something happen. And so it's hard for them to force plays. I think objectives, they should be really, really trying to make skirmishes happen around objectives. Because if SKT fight them at any point in the wrong situation or in the early to mid game, I think it's going to go really well for Griffin. But honestly, I don't know if SKT needs to. I think a lot of it's going to be Dragon RNG and how the game plays out, but I don't know if SKT needs to fight over every objective early. They might need to give a Dragon or two.
Yeah, they might need to. Another thing, and this is an actual, not, I would say a misunderstanding, but it's a difference that it's not talked about consistently when it comes to esports, when it comes to how the game goes on Summoner's Rift. And that is the difference between champions that don't scale really well, champions that stop scaling at some point, and champions that legitimately fall off, right? In the case of Hecarim, Rek'Sai is contested depending on the build. Don't build Infinity Edge, guys. They certainly come to a point where they have to build some semblance of defensive items to actually fulfill their role as divers. That's perfectly fine. They just don't build continuous items of damage.
Well, and they have Ezreal and Ryze, which helps with that because they deal a lot of damage. Like, they have a lot of DPS. If you play them well, which, Teddy is going to play well on Ezreal. That's just...
Yeah, and even nameplates of it's like that. We're just adding the bonus of knowing what
that SKT also,
what champion.
I mean, it's the final of the Korean. I assume everyone's going to play well on their champion, but also assuming in a vacuum, yes.
Yes, and on the side of Griffin. We've seen a variety of Olaf's builds across the Spring Split. We have seen the Redemption Olaf, we've seen the Black Cleaver Olaf, and it's sort of depends on what the Olaf user really wants to do. Early skirmishes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Redemption build is still a thing at all for Olaf, but the funniest part is that as much as I laugh at that build being a thing, this might be the game for it, because early skirmishes are going to be a real key for this game, for their comp.
And finally, we'll have to tackle the elephant in the room.
The bot
Taliyah Pantheon versus Ezreal Braum. Now, I want your thoughts on, as someone that hasn't seen this permutation of a bot lane.
Yeah, because I'm coming in a little more blind than you.
Actually, in some scrims we have, I think all leagues have realized that in this meta, you can really play whatever you want as long as it makes sense, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And particularly in a coordinated fashion when it comes to teams. Don't try this in solo queue unless you know what you're doing. So I want your thoughts on the reasoning behind Taliyah Pantheon and how it plays out against Ezreal Braum across the game.
For one thing, in a vacuum, not looking at opponent like lane matchup, that seems like a really strong combination, because a lot of Taliyah's damage comes down to landing a lot of her abilities. She can get off a pretty massive combo if she gets her. I haven't played her. Is it her W that throws them?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, the shove.
And so if you can land a Pantheon W, you can just one-shot someone, especially post. I guess not post 6, but post a couple of like when you start to get some damage. And especially with Olaf, it's a really interesting combination, because you end up having this Olaf who can deal a lot of damage but doesn't have CC, running into a situation where you have all the CC. Also, you have mixed damage in that lane, and so they can't easily itemize against you, whether it's with runes, whether it's with actual items.
So the Iceborne Gauntlet for Ezreal, for instance.
Yeah, like Taliyah is still going to mess him up. The one thing, though, is they're against an Ezreal Braum, and that's really safe. SKT is definitely going to get behind early game in the bot lane. They can't go for every CS. They can't get everything. But Ezreal is one of the safest ADC in the game, and Braum has pretty good mobility when his ADC is standing kind of far back.
Or there's minions.
So if they mess up, if Ezreal or Braum messes up, like, yes, there can be a kill. But I think that this is probably one of the best lanes you could have against them.
Yeah, there's also the argument and the side of Taliyah Pantheon of there's no kleptomancy, but we still call it frostmancy. Taliyah is not looking, as you can see, the Spell Thief's Edge on her items.
Sorry, the pause thing is in the way.
She is not looking to farm. She is looking to poke. Yeah, and to provide some sort of wave clear assistance to control the wave.
Yeah, if they get pushed.
Pantheon,
yeah.
Pantheon is getting all the CS, or 90% of the CS, and helping with the engages.
And that makes it even better, to be honest, because they're both going to have so much more gold. Like, if you have just a support Pantheon, then there comes a point in the game where he's not really doing much. But if he has gold, that point comes later.
Yeah, that point definitely comes later. It's delayed.
But it comes later.
I do have to also point out the summoner choices for SKT, because I think with the downfall of spellbook supports, we've definitely seen the rise of Guardian as the rune choice for the likes of Morgana. Obviously, we've seen it with Tahm Kench, but now with Braum, it's actually really interesting that he also gets to use the heal. Now, for those of you who don't know, Guardian will proc if you're standing on top of each other, like for instance the dual lane, but will also proc if some ability that you've used recently has targeted your ally and they are relatively close by, but they do not need to be.
For that.
Yeah, heal counts for that, and it's actually really really useful because Guardian not only gives you the shield, it gives you a small haste, right? So we're adding a little bit more of safety to that lane.
Yeah, because, I mean, I think the best possible, like, because Ezreal wants to be able to cleanse out of things, and so, like, just because it's such a scary lane, it's really interesting to me that, so he's going to take cleanse, and you have something like a Braum with a heal in Guardian, which is awesome, or, and I assume it was banned this game, but I'm not sure, you could also have the Tahm Kench having the cleanse, and
of course it was banned.
And, yeah, you could also have the Tahm Kench having the cleanse and the Ezreal having TP or something.
Yeah, even then, even with the likes of Tahm Kench, I would still think that Ezreal would like the cleanse just for the extra safety of. We could see double cleanse in many of these cases.
Oh,
right?
Interesting! Wow. Yeah.
So I think we've talked about the individual matchups, right?
Yeah.
Now, let's tackle composition versus composition. What do you think?
I mean, I've talked a bit about it already. I think that SKT doesn't have to hurry, and they also don't have to contest too many things. Because, I mean, it depends on what dragons spawn, but early skirmishes, especially right around level 6, and a little after, are going to be kind of terrifying for them. I mean, their bot lanes, the bot lanes do not have, for Griffin, do not have amazing level 6s or anything, obviously, but it's a little scary. They're very strong early, and they're very strong if you have to fight them. That's when their CC from the bot lane comes together with the other stuff like Akali and Olaf. SKT scales really well, or they transition into late game really well, so they need to be just a little bit careful. That's not to say they have early game stuff. They can do a lot early game if things pop up. They don't need to play scared, but they do need to be careful what fights they take, because Griffin is going to be looking for snowbally fights.
Yeah. I've always looked at when I draft for my teams, I always tell them that they should look at summoners, abilities, everything on what they add to the game, whether they are combat related or they're utility related, right? In the case of Griffin, it's actually really interesting that the two ultimates in the top side, top lane and jungle, are a mix, because we know Silas will take and hijack the enemy ultimates and use them freely in the late game. That's completely fine. But in this matchup in particular, he's likely to just steal whatever is in front of him during the early game.
And also right in front of it. I mean, even late game, he's going to steal what's in front of him because he's going to be stealing from Braum, probably, or Hecarim. All right, let's launch into the game. So, looks like they're stacking, they're 5-stacking here, which is interesting.
Yeah, that was actually a really interesting move. One of those. Can you even call them cheese anymore?
Well, yeah, because you would. I mean, I would expect their team to invade, but also it's pro, so maybe not. But their team is looking for that sort of early advantage. They want a snowball, and their team has so much CC right now.
Yeah, it's the next level.
Yeah, there we go. I'm interested to see how Rek'Sai reacts.
Yeah, I do think that they were actually looking for Ezreal, because you want to get your early Klepto procs if you can safely.
Yeah, so he probably would have been out and about looking for the person who was out, in the river for Griffin. That's interesting.
Yeah, and the line of scrimmage. Now, we've seen Rek'Sai reacting in her own red buff.
Yeah. I would say I'm confused why they wouldn't wait in that bush, why Braum would fire that so early, but the level 1 from Griffin is too scary.
Yeah. And also to think that they know Olaf is or could be in the general area.
Yeah.
Maybe they just don't want to take any
Olaf
chances.
Is starting bots. They're blue, so I'm very curious to see where Rek'Sai goes, because right now Olaf is stealing the entire blue side, and Rek'Sai is kind of a little late, but probably they're just going to vertical jungle. There isn't going to be anything too crazy happening.
Fun times, vertical jungling.
Silas has to play safe now, and Griffin can play a little aggressive bot lane. So that's an interesting difference, yeah.
Yeah. One thing to note, though, is that part of the reasoning of this vertical jungling started by Griffin, or caused by Griffin, is to know that they have incredible push potential. So they can decide to just shove in the wave. Ezreal Braum will not be able to shove or wave clear as fast.
Wow.
So they're just isolating bot lane.
Oh my. Pushing
Will they go for it?
All right.
And
I don't know if they needed to heal there. They got out a free TP, which is really good for them. If Silas can push it in quickly, just because if you have advantage bot side and they have advantage top side, then it's a pretty great idea to make sure that they can't take advantage of that top side. And if Hecarim is walking back to lane, then they're certainly not going to gank your top laner. So now Griffin has an advantage in both sides of the map, so in top side and bot side, a little one.
Yeah. Teleport priority in the top lane.
And an experience advantage, I assume, top lane.
Yes, a little bit.
Very good start for Griffin.
Excellent, actually. But I do have to point out that, as you correctly said, that heal was completely unnecessary. I could see the reasoning being giving some movement speed to escape, but it just looked like a panic heal.
Possibly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fine. That'll happen. I think that they got a big advantage, but yeah, that is one thing they gave back. One interesting thing to look at in the jungle matchup is that Olaf is gonna, despite also getting a playoff, he's gonna be one camp ahead here because Rek'Sai only took Gromp in blue, whereas Olaf took Wolves Gromp in blue from the blue side, and so Rek'Sai is one camp behind, as well as Olaf already putting pressure on the map, which is interesting.
Yeah, do have to point out that the blue side Krugs are gonna be a little slower on the respawn.
True, and that's a lot of XP.
Pathing.
True.
And that's a lot of XP, right?
Yeah.
Another thing is that although Silas had a lot of alone time in the top lane. He is still a few CS behind Khan.
Yeah, I think until that, I mean, you said you were mentioning he has the push advantage, but I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah, Khan is playing it well. I mean, the combat sum, the extra combat sum for Hecarim means that he can be a little aggressive in some of the trades.
Yeah, but also as we mentioned, that bot lane was isolated because both Griffin and SKT knew that Olaf was on their side or close to them. That was also the case for top lane. Silas knew and Hecarim knew that the only jungler close by was Rek'Sai.
Something cool is happening here in that I talked a lot in the pregame about how important the top lane matchup was and how the junglers were going to be focusing up there. But the level 1 and also the level 2 dive completely threw that off. Now, Griffin is trying to just hard snowball, especially with the first blood on Taliyah, this advantage bot lane, and Klid knows that, or Rek'Sai knows that she needs to come down and stop that, because if Rek'Sai was not here, they would just make another dive happen, and Teddy would be way behind.
Yeah, I think one can make the argument that Tarzan being down here is actually a waste of time right now, because the reasoning behind Pantheon Taliyah is that they are a kill lane, right?
Yeah.
That they can just, if you make a mistake against them, they will just obliterate you. So Tarzan is a little redundant in that equation.
Yeah.
Yes, I do think that there's the argument for counter ganking, which is absolutely fine.
Hey, sorry everybody, our connection did something strange, so we're hopefully back.
Yeah. So back to the point of Tarzan actually being redundant in the bot lane, because we know Taliyah Pantheon are a kill lane, right?
Yeah.
So I would guess that their shot calling was, let's counter gank Rek'Sai.
Yeah.
And whilst that is a completely viable strategy and it's respectable, I do think that another course of action that would have been even more beneficial towards for Griffin. I say that as a play is happening. I think it would be more beneficial for Olaf to just starve out Rek'Sai. Though you did mention about Dragon RNG, and that
I think
that Infernal Drake was definitely.
I think a lot of his point was an Infernal is spawning, and if I have Prio bot, I can just solo it, and that's what he did. So I think that's an interesting point, because I agree with you, but they just got a 1-for-1 top while getting a free Infernal Drake, and so I think it worked out for them. I don't know.
Yeah. And though the Infernal Drake is actually beneficial for their comp because they are, in essence, 5 damage dealers, there is also the argument to be made that maybe you could have accelerated the game even further and interesting play.
Yeah. Huh.
Would have gotten away without the Rek'Sai there.
Yeah.
Even if it's an Infernal Drake, you can just make it so that the enemy team can't go close to it and use your downtime to take it. Instead of sacrificing your tempo and making plays elsewhere on the map.
Well, because his farm lead is gone now, too, which... Yeah, I mean, because Rek'Sai's going to take these Krugs. Yeah. And he's going to be even on farm at least, and probably ahead on the EXP.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah, I think that Griffin is... It's hard to say, because I think that Griffin is doing interesting things with their lead. I don't know if it's going to be enough. We'll see what sort of early skirmishes happen, because I think that the next Drake is also an Infernal, which does help them a lot within the right focus.
There's also one point that I want to make, and that is that Griffin are using or are commandeering a composition that if if they keep winning fights, they come to a point where they are just overwhelming to the enemy team, right?
Yeah. And that's what they need to do in order to pull off their combo.
Well, yeah. 2 teleports, so this is a 4-1 composition that the 1 is not going to come to them. They are going to come to the 1. And that's actually, I think that's actually pretty hilarious. But if they lose one fight, one single fight before an objective, they are on the back foot.
Yeah.
Because their composition will not scale to the point of matching SKT scaling comp.
The Infernal is nice to like get for them. I think the issue is like if they it feels like, maybe I'm crazy, but it feels like if SKT like ever managed to secure a dragon, they just win.
Yeah. Questionable ult by Lehens there.
I think that
the
gave
Pantheon.
up a lot of their pressure bottom lane too.
Yeah, to do the Rift Herald, and I think that's fine.
Yeah.
But I do think that Khan would have wasted a little bit more than just some HP if that was played correctly.
Yeah.
I think you could have forced the Hecarim ult to escape.
I do think they're making good decisions. Like we talked about before the game, how they need to prioritize objectives. And they're doing that where they lane swap to secure the Rift Herald, and then they're gonna swap back probably to try and take this Drake after they take this tower. But we will see. They might get if SKT get off this trade. I don't know how I feel about this. Griffin.
Yeah, Rift Herald though, true damage, not even close.
Oh, I knew Griffin would get the first tower, but I mean if SKT can get one as well. But yeah, Griffin's using this Rift Herald pretty well. Yeah. Fair enough. They do need to get back bottom eventually, though, or they lose this Infernal. So it's interesting. Good job by Silas, though, to clear the wave.
Yeah, some of that wave clear and
that you were talking about,
yeah, some of that wave clear doing work there. I do think that also trading 2 turrets for 1 here wouldn't be the end of the world. One thing that I do think would have been better for Griffin was to automatically put both Viper and Lehens in the mid lane, and send Chovy to a side lane at this point in the game. Why is that? Because Taliyah and Pantheon can just disappear from mid lane to either side lane or the enemy jungle
and
or their own
ults
jungle.
have so much threat.
Yeah, they could thread the entire map
Also,
from being mid lane.
Yeah, if you want to secure this Drake, the best thing to have is mid priority. And so yeah, them being mid here, like I don't know what they get bottom. I mean, they're also going to get dragon priority down there, but where are they going from bottom lane? They don't have anywhere near as much threat into the enemy jungle or to the enemy lanes. That's a good point.
Also on what you were just mentioning, yeah, Akali would have a harder time clearing against Ezreal Braum. I don't think there would be a lot of kill pressure because Akali Shroud and all of that. You could have Tarzan and Olaf shadowing Akali bot lane.
I don't think that Ezreal and Braum can step up there, though, because you don't just keep Viper and Lehens standing mid lane. Like, they quick push a wave and then disappear. Because if they're gone on the map and they're either mid or bot, you can't even walk up to that tower or you just die to 4 people. So I don't know if that's an issue. I don't think it matters if Akali can't clear.
Exactly.
Yeah, here comes SKT's going for this Infernal. Wow. Are they just gonna get it? Yeah, they just got it. Wow. Yeah, I think that's a huge issue for Griffin.
Yeah, it sort of seems like a lapse of judgment and attention from Griffin.
Get a bunch of kills off this fight, this game is really bad for them now. This
Yep.
is that one mistake that we talked about where their comp can't really sustain it. Yeah, if they just get out now, that's real. I mean, it could have been much worse there. It looked like Griffin was on the edge of getting that fight turned on them, but
Yeah.
I do think this is the game. The game just went in a different direction.
Yeah, it comes to a point that this fight will bottleneck Griffin's performance for the rest of the game, because now they are matched in Drake's.
Yeah,
so the investment, the investment that Griffin made in the
Sorry, you cut out. Can you repeat yourself?
that the investment by SKT taking the Infernal Drake, the investment that Griffin made in the early game to secure that Infernal Drake has just been nullified.
Yeah, especially since they put so much into that bottom lane.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild. Okay, so, I mean, so Griffin is ahead in gold, but that fight means I think SKT just pulled even or even pulled ahead, comp-wise.
Yeah, comp-wise, I think gold is going to be better spent on SKT.
Yeah.
Griffin is definitely strong, but they are strong in certain conditions. They're strong in 2v2, 3v3 skirmishes. They are strong when they have the push and if SKT is out of position, but they are not strong to just
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the key...
fight on a good way of... Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, you cut out there. My bad. I thought you would... Yeah, my bad.
No, that's fine.
I mean, I think a huge thing is... yeah, I mean, I think that Griffin is looking for skirmishes, and the issue here is the last skirmish we had was around that Drake, and now why in the hell would SKT need to skirmish?
Yeah.
They can just sit on their scaling advantage.
Yeah, wait for Griffin to make the mistake that loses them the game instead of try to force those errors from Griffin, because that could lead to Griffin actually pulling back to or actually using the strength of their composition again.
Yeah. I mean, how do you think... So from here, how do you think Griffin makes something happen? How do you think they correct things? Because they correct the slight slide.
I think the only way...
Sorry.
that they
what?
can teleport...
Repeat yourself? My bad. Cut out.
Yeah. I think the only way that Griffin actually use their advantages and increase their advantages right now is by attacking the teleport users on SKT. Because if they go for Ezreal or Braum, it's likely that SKT is going to answer with their own teleports.
Yeah.
Well,
it's likely since that Griffin has teleport disadvantage right now.
Yeah, it's likely that they won't be able to quickly kill the Ezreal. Perhaps Braum, perhaps Rek'Sai, but even then, they are under the threat of teleports from SKT.
Yeah.
And I think that's the only possible choice that they have, unless the map just engages in two different fights, right? That there are two theaters, two skirmishes going on, and maybe with some mechanic. But I don't think that is likely to happen.
No, I think that SKT is going to play it slow. I mean, I think... It's Korea. They know how to play a slower macro game and not give anything too crazy away. I don't know.
Yeah, it's controlled losses. What they are going to be looking to take here. One thing, and this is something that coaches we try to teach to our players, is that though on paper and stats wise, yes. Taking two turrets is absolutely fine. But now top lane is such a long lane.
Yeah, SKT can just catch waves.
Yeah, And now, just for the price of pushing that wave and forcing someone to go and clear and then having to teleport, they had to do it themselves. And I think that's absolutely bad.
Yeah. So Griffin gets this dragon, but I think they just lose this fight. I'm not sure, but
yes,
yeah.
It's likely that they will, and we are so deep into the bottleneck of this.
Yeah. They set up that dragon way too hastily. That was a 50-50. They didn't have priority there. Like, that was not them setting up a good Drake and sacrificing a couple members for it. That
is true.
That was SKT's Drake. They just lost it, and then Griffin lost a fight off of it.
Yeah. Interestingly, whatever advantage Griffin is going to take for that Infernal Drake will be offset by just the time that SKT has just bought itself.
Yeah.
By winning this fight.
Yeah, because now SKT gets to clear some waves, buy some items, and relax until the next situation they have to deal with.
Yeah, and Faker just played this magnificently. He was 1v3 inside the Dragon Pit, whilst Chobi was 1v2, 1v3 on the other side.
I do think he used his abilities on the Drake at the wrong time. I think he could have waited and tried harder to burst it with Rek'Sai. But Rek'Sai, I think, was in a different situation. I don't know. Pre-Drake being taken, I think there could have been more done by SKT to secure it. But post-Drake, that fight was played immaculately.
Yeah. Looking back, I think losing the Drake is an afterthought, because what they were looking to do is actually win a fight.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And I think that being on different pages might have been what cost them the dragon.
Yeah, and I think that wasn't even the point. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Now we come to the point in the game where it's a race of who can take the mid lane tier 1 turret to open up the map.
Yeah, because whoever takes mid tier 1 will have Baron priority for the next 5 minutes.
Yeah, and even though Griffin are able to push waves fast, their wave clear is not that safe compared to what Faker and Teddy can just fire skill shots from a distance.
Yeah, from 8 miles away.
And that's going to be a big mid lane tier 1.
Yeah. I think SKT is almost certainly gonna. Oh well. Yeah, I mean, I think they're able to wave clear it either way. I think we're gonna look for a play up here. Look at where Griffin's heading. Yeah, I don't know. It's okay.
I get the cancel of Rice's realm warp.
Yeah. Well, this is a good fight for Griffin.
Yes. Now,
I think that was just a mistake from SKT, though.
Yeah, it was. And as I was saying, Griffin needed to attack the teleport users.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like when you play against Shen. You don't really want to engage on Shen's teammates because he's just gonna pop up.
And you'll have a 4v5 on your hands. Yeah.
Yeah. But you do want to attack Shen because his teammates cannot show up as fast.
One interesting thing there, though, is that Griffin got nothing off of that. I don't know. Yeah.
Sorry, you were saying?
So one interesting thing is that Griffin got nothing off of that. Like, if we look, doesn't look like they got the objectives. They didn't even we weren't even able to use that tempo advantage to grab mid tower.
Yeah, and that is a sort of loss control that SKT did there, because the pick happened in the lane that was already wounded, in that sense that it hasn't got tier 1, tier 2 turrets.
Yeah.
So there is nothing to take there. This is a mistake that teams make when they overextend or overstay in lanes that are protected, lanes that have the turrets, etc.
Yeah.
Try to defend the turret, and they end up getting killed, and the objective gets taken. The best place to make one of those chimp mistakes is on a lane that has lost
Yeah. If you've lost both towers, yeah.
everything.
Yeah. One interesting thing, this dragon is pretty important, I think, because mountain. If SKT gets a mountain, they're gonna have a huge advantage on mid push and Baron control for the whole rest of the game. I don't know if it's amazing. Like, I don't think it matters that much for Griffin if they get it, but keeping SKT from getting this Drake is kind of important, feels like.
Yeah. And now that we know the dragons that Griffin has and SKT has, and the build paths that they have chosen to follow, it's actually interesting the interaction between team compositions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
the
my.
most likely. Oh, here we go.
Nope. Never mind.
No kills, Korean style.
Yep. Continue. Sorry.
Yeah. The most likely scenario where Griffin engages a fight correctly is to have both Tarzan, Chovy, and Lehans in one of SKT's carries' face.
Yeah. Sorry,
And
repeat yourself
Silas.
there? You cut out.
Yeah. The most likely scenario and the most beneficial scenario for Griffin is having a fight where they can layer their CC and they can assassinate one of SKT's carries by just leveraging the point-and-click CC,
Yeah.
the fact that Silas and both Silas, Olaf, and Akali can dive someone. But that's a huge problem, because if they blow their cooldowns to kill one member of SKT, the other 3 damage dealers will just rip them to shreds.
Yeah. True.
Right? There is no true tankiness on the side of Griffin, aside from perhaps the soft tankiness of
Pantheon and Olaf.
Even Silas with the shield and the heal. Olaf is a mix of a tank utility right now, and Pantheon, well, the only thing he has got for him
is his passive. Yeah, his passive.
And what I assume is the Guardian Angel that he's building with that Chain Vest.
Yeah. Okay, so
Now,
Griffin's going for this. Oh, man.
Yeah. Whoever
have
takes this dragon, this
Oh,
Baron.
Well, now that's really good for Griffin. They're using. So the interesting thing to me was that Griffin got that mountain, which meant they had Baron threat, and then SKT got mid tower. They should have had mid prio and been able to clear vision and take over vision. I'm interested that they let them just do that blind.
Yeah, I think Griffin just skipped the step there and said to SKT, well, you want to prepare Baron. Well, whilst you do that, let me just take the Baron itself.
They were focusing on getting mid priority and backing and making sure they had everything, and then Griffin's just like, okay, we've got to do this. And I think they did have to do that. If they didn't get that right then, the game was pretty much over. It's really good for them.
As I was saying, whoever takes this Baron has to know that just by taking it, there is no clear way of maneuvering the game after you take it. Because both compositions, even though their wave clears are different in many ways, one of them is actually safe, one isn't, one is mixed damage, one is pure magical damage. Really, this is a gold Baron rather than a push Baron.
Which is very bad for Griffin in that they need to have... They need to start converting things right now. They've gotten a lot of one fights or one situations that gave them advantages, but they didn't really do much with them. So if they don't do something with this Baron, it's going to be getting a little late in the game. Like, SKT's starting to get their items. Ezreal's on 3 full items.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a timer to lose, if I've ever seen one.
Mm-hmm.
right? I think those of us who've been around playing the game for quite some time, that we got to face top lane pantheons and they were absolutely destroying us, we knew that they were on a timer. That it would come to a point where they, even if they were so far ahead, they wouldn't be able to use that advantage in team fights and big skirmishes. And I think that's what must be on SKT's head, knowing that it doesn't matter, right? We just have to lose as what we have to lose, but hang in there, because we are definitely stronger in the long run.
We say this and we're talking down Griffin's chances. I do think that SKT has given up more than they had to, for sure.
Yes.
And I think that they misplayed some areas around these objectives. They've lost 2 dragons that were kind of 50-50s. They gave up that Baron. They've misplayed some of the objective play. But what the other thing we're saying is completely right. We don't need to, like, they don't need to have gotten these objectives. Their comp is still doing its job.
Yeah. And it comes to a point where, yes, you have to commend Griffin for doing what they have, being there to steal, being there to take the Baron, but at what cost? And I will keep coming back to this. The cost has been that they've been pushed into doing those things because they didn't leverage their tempo advantage in the early game. They didn't push hard enough. They didn't risk enough in many cases. And yes, there have been some misplays. But I think the misplays, mistakes by action are definitely easier to spot than mistakes by inaction.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of what's let this game slowly kind of slip out of the fingers of Griffin. Like, they're still ahead on gold, but it feels like they're very behind. Or at least they're even. I think that it's hard to say their win condition now.
Yeah, it comes to a point that we cannot assess their win conditions because they don't even know what they are.
I think one good win condition is the fact that they're getting a double mountain. That helps a ton.
Yeah, that helps a ton. That definitely speeds up their turret taking when they get the chance to attack turrets.
One mistake and SKT's winning this game. I mean, it's still on a razor's edge, and that's what they decided with this comp. Then, if there's any team in the world that could do that, it's Griffin. Play that razor's edge. But they didn't execute it perfectly this game.
Yeah, I think if we were allowed to maybe think of alternatives to execute this type of composition, I would have definitely put a DPS champion in the mid lane, just as an insurance policy of having maybe.
Sorry, repeat yourself.
Yeah, an Azir, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Oh, sorry, you're back now. Yeah, an Azir.
Yeah,
you were saying. I mean, that would
either
make sense.
Azir or Cassiopeia, just
or
we have time.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Or I don't know who picked, like, when the Rise was picked, but the Rise would have been okay for their team.
Yeah, definitely. Even if the Rise was taken before, I think Akali was rather late in the draft.
Fair enough.
A DPS champion, even if it's a mage like Cassiopeia or Azir, would allow them to take objectives a little bit faster, regardless of what dragons they end up getting or not getting. and it's an insurance policy for the late game, even if it's 3. We remember Fnatic for the triple AP way back in the day, and yeah, they could have had an insurance policy for the late game.
One thing to be said, though, is that Griffin decided to go all in on the
But they
idea.
decided.
Sorry. Oh, I didn't realize you were cut out there. My bad. So yeah, they decided to go all in on this comp idea, and I think that's a very. I mean, if they're looking for synergistic playstyles or plays to make, then that's a good plan. But yeah, they didn't have the insurance policy. They're deciding this is their plan.
Yeah. And another thing that's very important for determining the win conditions, right, is how flexible is your composition.
Yeah.
The more flexible your composition is, the more win conditions you can think of, depending on how you play, how you position, who you focus, etc. Both teams have pseudo front lines at this point.
Yeah.
Right? Because Olaf, Akali will be there, but they won't be absorbing damage, right? They want to be fighting and going in and out of aggressive and defensive stances in the team fights. But as time progresses, Hecarim and Rek'Sai, and with Braum thrown in, they're looking like and there is no way in hell that Griffin can fight front to back.
No, because I mean they just don't have they don't have an ADC, whereas the enemy team has Ezreal and Ryze to DPS, and they just have a strange comp. It's just different.
Yeah, I'm all for innovation, but
this is the downside. This point in the game is the downside to the innovation. Yeah. Oh, here comes a fight. Oh, this is very bad for Griffin. Yeah, this is exactly what we were talking about, where that one mistake can cost them something.
Yeah, and we don't usually talk about this, but that Talia ult, shout out to Kobe, sucked. People don't seem to remember that Braum blocks Talia ult.
I did not realize that's the case. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, that's wild. That's cool. Wow. Yeah, this is huge. The game is. I mean, the game's wide open for SKT now. They just
This is a point where SKT has complete agency of the map, right?
Yeah, and they can do stuff with this Baron.
Yeah. At this point, if SKT makes a mistake, it doesn't really matter anymore. Because they have more threats and more flexibility within their win condition and how flexible their composition is, that it doesn't matter if Hecarim or Rek'Sai die. Doesn't matter if either Ryze or Ezreal die. As long as the other one's still alive, they can still make things happen.
Yeah.
But if a single member on the Griffin side dies, it's gone. Their chances are gone.
I don't know what their win con would be. I mean, besides getting Elder and acing SKT right now, I don't know what their win con is anymore. Because I think that fight was the one that kind of loses them the entire... Like, I just don't know what they do from here. It's interesting.
Yeah. Experience is no longer a factor right now.
Yeah.
So grouping up, the only one who will suffer is us support mains, because we will not get our share of experience. But
I mean, speaking of experience, Tarzan is now the same level as Clid, whereas for most of the game he's been 2 or so levels behind.
Yeah,
it's really interesting. Or Clid's been 2 or so levels behind. So
behind.
I don't know. I just don't think Griffin has much to say in this game right now.
Yeah,
they just had to
coming back to that point, when 2 of your carries are level 16, 17, 18, you can group for free. Yeah. Because, yes, it's harder to level up from the higher level you are. And this is a beautiful realm warp.
Yeah.
To actually force the...
Them not having any mountains is hurting a little bit already, but...
The Elder.
Yeah, there we are. Oh, man.
And here we go.
That was a steal. Wow.
That was a steal, but was that really the fight that they wanted to take?
I think SKT just ends here if they play it right.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The damage that Ezreal and Ryze are going to do to the turrets is just way too much.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Chovy.
That's a mistake by that. Yeah, wow. Well played, Chovy. That hurts. But...
Oh,
man.
Will that ultimate cancel?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's game. Yeah, that was a really interesting game. And it very much came down to executing team comps.
Yeah. And to SKT recognizing that, yes, they could have played the early game better, but it's just that the Griffin composition gave them the leeway to make those mistakes and not pay for them.
I mean, they gave up four free Drakes off of weird 50-50s, and even a Baron off of a strange play, but it didn't matter because of the way the game was going at those moments. That was not the priority.
Yes. And I think if you take away, if you just show someone the HUD of this game, Griffin versus SKT, 4 dragons and an elder versus 1 dragon, 6 kills to 11. This isn't the outcome that you would expect.
No.
And it's precisely because, yes, Griffin invested way more than they needed to on this idea of a composition and shot themselves in the foot by doing so.
Yeah. And I think they did get the advantages early they needed to execute the competition. I think that SKT played very well from behind, and I think that Griffin had some macro moments that they did not execute in the transition from early to mid-game that would have given them a chance at it.
Yeah, it did to certain players on both sides, but I would certainly focus on how reliable as Teddy on Ezreal was. That he's just doing his job, right? Poking, and if they come close, and if they stay close, just melting them.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think that there was too much that Griffin could do, because just the baseline of what SKT could do was enough.
I mean, the interesting
at some points in the game.
Yeah, the interesting thing to me was from about 22 or 23 minutes onward, Griffin kind of got everything they wanted objective-wise, but it didn't matter. Like, the game was pretty much over at that point, which is really interesting, because they were ahead and they kept getting Drakes and Barons, but it didn't matter. Like, the comps just didn't care. Sorry, you cut out there.
No, just said yes, indeed.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I think that's we've said a lot of things about this game, and I think that it was a really interesting one. I hope that people enjoyed our review of it, and I think I'm excited to do some more of these. Hopefully, once we get the connection figured out.
Yeah. Riot Productions.
All right, so thank you so much for helping me with this. And
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.